Some of you may be asking yourselves, so why is the Hood River Valley Residents Committee coming to talk to us about smart growth within the city of Hood River? Isn't the Residents Committee all about preserving the countryside? And we are. We're proud of our nearly 40-year history of protecting our county's farms, forests, and special wild places. But for all that long history, we have also been about this, ensuring the livability of our cities. The town and country are inextricably entwined. We've learned that the best way to protect resource land is with a really great city. When residents' needs can't be practically met in the city, that's when people look longingly at the farmland beyond the urban growth boundary to site the next subdivision, factory, or school. But more than that, we all love the city of Hood River. Many of our members live within the city limits. And even for those who live in the country, the city is where we come to work and shop and play. When we aren't at home is where we spend our time and where we spend our money. In the last 30 years, a lot of terms have been created to describe land use systems that break with automobile-centric suburban sprawl. Tonight, for simplicity, I'm going to use one of the oldest terms, smart growth, as a catch-all to describe all these concepts. The term smart growth came about in the 1990s, at a time when many communities were so concerned about the consequences of rapid development that no growth was a popular concept. Smart growth acknowledges that growth is inevitable, but it posits that cities should strive to be better, not just bigger. Oregon was smart growth before smart growth was cool. We adopted a statewide planning system way back in 1977 that anticipated many of the values of the smart growth movement. For instance, our state system puts a big emphasis on citizen-driven planning, that public engagement is a critical part of good land use. The statewide goals strongly protect farm and forest land, and we try to keep our cities compact and efficient by requiring every one of them to set an urban growth boundary. So here is a list of the principles of smart growth. We don't have time to talk about every one of them tonight, but you'll notice that many overlap and reinforce each other. It's easier to have a walkable neighborhood, number 4, when you have compact development, number 2, and that walk is more worthwhile when you mix uses, number 1, and an attractive, distinctive community with a strong sense of place, number 5. Critics of smart growth complain that its advocates want to put people in little tiny houses, squish them close together, and take away their cars. That's completely untrue. Core smart growth principles are that communities should offer a variety of housing and transportation choices so that each individual can choose what's right for them. Some people assume that smart growth is a framework that's only relevant to big cities, that it's for New York or Portland, but not for a small town like Hood River. But smart growth works for communities of every size, and in fact, many of its ideas are a throwback to the way we've built towns for most of human civilization. This is an aerial view of a village in England, but it could be France, China, or India. For hundreds of years, humans have organized themselves in densely inhabited towns surrounded almost immediately by open countryside. All that changed in the late 19th and early 20th century, when the Industrial Revolution put factories belching toxic smoke next to people's houses. Zoning was created to separate uses that were incompatible with each other. At the beginning, this was done for health and safety reasons, but over time, and with the invention of the automobile, this separation of uses became more extreme. Conventional zoning is called Euclidian zoning. It has nothing to do with a Greek philosopher. It's named after a town in Ohio that was the subject of a Supreme Court case that made zoning legal. Euclidean zoning segregates uses, so there are areas where people are allowed to live, a different area where they're allowed to work, and another to shop. By segregating uses, Euclidean zoning virtually requires us to own a car to have an independent, productive life. Here is a greatly simplified version of Hood River's zoning map. The blue area shows where people are allowed to live, residential zoning. Yellow is where people can manufacture things, industrial. The red and the purple are where you can have a shop or an office, and the green areas are schools and parks. I want you to notice the lighter shaded area in the top right corner. That represents Hood River's historic development, the parts of town that were built before the automobile. Notice how finely detailed it is, with a wide variety of uses in a small space placed cheek by jowl. Now look at the bottom left-hand corner, the blue area. It's a sea of pure residential with a couple of tiny green pocket parks. The larger green rectangle is West Side School. Do you see a small number 72 in the top right and a 24 towards the left? Those are walk scores for particular houses. WalkScore is an online site that allows you to put in any address in the country, and it runs an algorithm to tell you how walkable the neighborhood is. The house at 72 is actually our new mayor's house, and his walk score is 72. Very walkable. Most errands can be accomplished on foot. Whereas the house at 24 is considered car dependent. Almost all errands require a car. Let's look at 3 different parts of town. This is, of course, downtown Hood River. It's the oldest part of town, and the part of town that ticks all the smart growth boxes for what makes a great neighborhood. It's walkable, it's lively, it's distinctive with a strong sense of place. It mixes uses both within blocks and within buildings, and shows how well a vibrant mix can work. The photo on your left shows a condo and a real estate office next to each other. But look at the space between the buildings. There's Full Sail, a major U.S. beer manufacturer factory on the same block. The photo on the right shows uses stacked in a single building. Coffee shop on the ground floor, then offices, then an apartment on top. Some of you might have seen a recent letter to the editor. The letter writer complained that she used to work downtown and that the cars downtown were very polite and always stopped for pedestrians. But now she works in the Heights on 12th Street, and the drivers there are very rude, dangerous, and you're taking your life in your hands when you try to cross the street. When I read this, I felt like she was right, but I wondered why. Both Oak Street and the Heights are historic commercial districts. They both have state highways running through them. The posted speed limits are very similar. But look at the bottom picture. See that one-way sign? One-way systems are designed to move cars efficiently and quickly. Everything about these streets is sending subtle cues to both drivers and pedestrians that this is a car-centric zone. Along with being one-way, the streets are wide. On wide streets, drivers feel comfortable going fast. The speed limit on 12th is 25 miles an hour. On Oak Street, it's 20. Pretty close, right? And yet that's not what happens in practice. I've been tracking the actual speed traffic flows. Oak has a posted speed limit of 20 miles an hour, but in real life, cars tend to travel slower, 10 or 15 miles an hour. At that speed, it's easy to see a pedestrian crossing the street and easy to stop for them. In contrast, on the Heights, while it's posted 25 miles an hour, actual travel speeds are more likely to be 30 or 35. It turns out our letter writer was wrong. It's not that drivers are ruder in the Heights, it's just that they're traveling faster, so they don't have time to see a pedestrian in the crosswalk. In the old days, we might have tried to fix speeding on 12th and 13th by posting more signs or by having police write tickets. Traffic engineers these days have moved to a new model. They call it self-enforcing roads, where they design the streetscape to encourage certain behaviors. For instance, it seems counterintuitive, but narrow roads are safer than wide ones. On a wide street, there's a lot of cushion for error, so a driver feels safe going fast. But the natural reaction to a narrow street is to drive slower. Pedestrian safety isn't the only reason to get rid of the one-way system. For at least the last 15 years, people have hoped for a resurgent shopping district in the Heights. You formed an urban renewal district to accomplish just that. The one-way system is holding the Heights back. One-ways kill commerce, especially a system like ours, which is designed for speed, to move cars through rather than arriving at a place. City after city has revitalized their commercial districts by removing their one-way systems with consistent results. Less vacant shops, higher revenue per square foot. We should make the Heights a place rather than just a road. We can do it in stages, and we can experiment. Many cities have found that they can test drive pedestrian and place-making improvements with very little cost, just cans of paint and planter boxes. The top 2 photos show a couple of trial street design elements: a temporary curb bump out, which is a traffic calming device, and a parklet, which takes up 2 parking places and allows sidewalk seating for an adjacent restaurant. The bottom photos show curb extensions used to make the street crossing distance shorter for pedestrians. The one on the left also incorporates a green infrastructure feature. That's a bioswale for infiltrating stormwater. And finally, my very favorite urban design element, the street tree. If you've got time to kill, let me take you to coffee and I can tell you all the ways street trees will blow your mind. Apart from being spectacularly beautiful and providing aesthetic pleasure, they perform a huge variety of essential functions better, cheaper, and more elegantly than anything ever created by man. They sequester carbon from the atmosphere, and they're more efficient where we need it most. A city street tree sequesters 10 times the carbon of its brother tree in the wild. Trees intercept stormwater. 30% of the rain that lands on the branches of a tree never makes it to the ground. They reduce heat island effect, shading buildings and the street, making us more comfortable and reducing summer cooling costs by 30%. Asphalt that's shaded by trees doesn't experience the dramatic heat of summer, prolonging asphalt life by up to 60%. And let's get the right kinds of trees, like the ones in this picture, that at maturity provide a luxurious canopy over the street, not just little lollipop trees dotted down the road. We've talked about two historic parts of town, our 4-star downtown and the Heights, which you'll be giving attention to over the next several years as an urban renewal district. Now, let's revisit Walk Score 24 on the west side of town. It's a nice neighborhood, pretty houses, which are old enough that the landscaping is beginning to mature. Imagine that you live there and you want to buy half a gallon of milk. As the crow flies, Safeway is just about half a mile away, an easily walkable distance. Sounds good, right? You could walk along the new Wine Country Avenue, or would you rather take Grand Road? Well, your choice isn't much of a choice at all because neither are safe, friendly, or comfortable routes for walkers. 40% of Americans are too young, too old, too poor, disabled, or just don't want to drive a car. Walkable communities with good sidewalks, compact design, and a mix of uses in each neighborhood gives options and independence for those 40% of our residents who don't drive. Finally, the most prosaic reason a city should embrace smart growth. It's the most beneficial development pattern for your own finances. Development patterns strongly impact the financial productivity of the city. The more densely built, the more tax revenue you collect on a per-acre basis. This is Walmart. A big lot, but not much taxable development because most of the property is parking or undeveloped. The parcel is 11 acres, about the size of 6 blocks downtown, but pays just $22,000 a year in property taxes. Parking is another topic for another day, but oversized parking lots like this one represent some of our best opportunities for infill development. Density of development doesn't just affect what comes in, it affects what goes out. Less dense developments not only yield less tax revenue per acre, but your expenses go up as well. Spread out developments mean that you have to create and maintain a more extensive road network, longer routes for snowplows and school buses. Fire trucks have to cover a larger area. This slide of Katie's Lane shows a nice example of the opposite, of how compact design can pay off for the city's coffers. This dense placement of houses, lots of tax revenue per acre. And the modest infrastructure, that street serves a lot of houses, but it's narrow, so it's cheaper to build and to maintain. You will spend much of your time on city council, wrangling with budgets and setting policies, which 10 or 20 years down the road will be forgotten by most people. But when we build, change, or destroy something physical in the city, we're making a mark that can last, if not forever, at least for 50 or 100 years. Most of the buildings in this 70-year-old photo are still in use today, providing not only economic value, but a sense of civic pride. As we plan for our city's current needs, we can hope that if we do it right, our choices will provide the same kind of enduring value for generations to come. Thanks for letting me speak tonight.